Oh my gosh, there's so many kids in this house and I don't have a very large house. I'm about to go crazy because it's rainy or snowy and we're stuck indoors and I don't know what to do. Sarah, help me. Help me. Hey glue sticks, Sarah here, back for another daycare day video where I talk about something daycare related. I'm a childcare provider in my home to up to 10 kids, and I often am confronted with this from you guys, and it's a topic that I'm confronted with on a daily basis in my own home, and that topic is not having a lot of space. Now, most of us don't live in mansions. If we did, we probably would not be childcare providers because the pay is not that good. And a lot of times, a home is created for a family, not to run a business out of. So sometimes it can be really hard managing a small amount of space with quite a few kids. Even 5 kids is a lot of kids in a space. So today I'm going to be talking about how I have learned to deal with a smaller daycare space with many kids. Now, I have had a lot of comments on my previous daycare tours about like, oh my gosh, your space is so amazing, and I am very grateful for my space. I did plan on doing daycare, or at that time I was planning to do preschool out of my home. So when we were house hunting, I picked this house with that intention. But once you actually get the stuff in here and the kids in here and go about your day, I've learned that it can really work differently than you had anticipated. My daycare level is actually 2 levels because we have a 4-level home. It's really confusing, and I'll link to the daycare tours below so you guys know what I'm talking about. So altogether my space is a decent size, but we're never really on it all at the same time because there's 2 different levels. So we're either in this room, which is pretty small, which is normally where we are, or we're in the basement, which is more in the winter and stuff like that. So I just wanted to go through some tips that I think can work for most of you, if not all of you guys, if you don't have a large space or it just feels cramped sometimes, or you're stuck indoors because it's rainy or super hot or snowy, which is a lot of the year for us. It's very snowy here in Minnesota, so a lot of the time we are stuck indoors. Maybe not all day, but most of the day. And so I've had to be really creative with how to deal with a not so very big space. Tip number 1, less is more. The key, I think, to surviving indoors with not very much space is to not have a lot of stuff. If you have a ton of stuff in a small space, kids love to dump. They love to take toys out and just leave them everywhere. If you have fewer toys, that just can't happen on a level that will drive you crazy. Plus, I found that it's beneficial also because they will play better, they won't fight as much, their play will be more imaginative and deeper. And so I just like to include more open-ended toys, magnetiles, blocks, coloring, you know, craft supplies, that kind of stuff. Little people, but without lots of doll houses and stuff like that, and just letting them play. All that kind of stuff. And I also like to rotate the toys so that we don't have a lot of toys out at one time, but it's not the same toys all the time. Tip number 2, create zones. If you are able, try to create some zones in your space. So section things off, maybe put a bookcase or small, you know, even chairs or something to separate the space so that maybe you have like a block area or you have a craft area. In this room we have the table, so I often put table activities there to encourage some kids to sit down. I have 2 areas like this around the fireplace. We call it up high. So if a kid or 2 want to play, you know, alone, I tell them to go up high. And it's only the older kids that can actually get up there. So they will take their toys up there and the other kids know like not to bother them. That allows them to have some space without being totally away from kids so that they can, you know, do their own thing and not have to share the toys they're playing with up there. It can really help because when you are tight on space, kids tend to fight more because they're, you know, hoarding toys and they feel like people are encroaching upon them, or maybe they just want some space away from others. So having different zones can help separate the space without adding more space. And then I also have a bench over by the bathroom where kids can go to calm down, and it's more separated from the other areas so that, you know, they can just have a few minutes to chill out. Kind of going off of this, tip number 3 is to do center play. This is something I love to do in the afternoons in the winter when we try to get outside in the morning, but in the afternoon we're not usually putting on all our gear because kids are going to be picked up soon and it just creates chaos. So what I do is I set up different kinds of toys throughout the room. I don't even have like physical barriers usually between them. And then I tell the kids, you know, you two will be in a group, you two will be in a group, you two will be in a group, and so on. And I'll set the timer for like 10 or 15 minutes, and then they will play in their assigned spot for that amount of time, and then we will switch. So I'll often have like a block area, I'll have like a baby doll, kitchen area, maybe cars and little people area, and then I'll have like coloring or puzzles or whatever table activities on the table. And this helps so much because they're not fighting, because they only have like 2 people in a group, so they're playing together really well. They're not taking toys all over the room and dumping them. They're restricted on what they can play with, and it really helps them to learn to play with different things, learn to play with different kids, and just play in a different way. And it's worked so well for those times when we're just stuck indoors for a long time, to not have the fighting and, you know, just getting irritated with each other because we're with each other so much. Tip number 4 is to mix things up. Maybe have different like bigger ticket items that you bring in from time to time, like a mini trampoline, or I know of providers who get a bounce house, so when they're really going crazy in their small space, they blow up the bounce house and the kids take turns jumping on it. It's obviously not something you'd have up all the time, but it can be a fun thing to mix up what you do. I incorporate things like sensory bins, so we're not using the space the same way all the time. There's other ways to use it, and that way, you know, we're playing and learning in new ways, and we're not getting frustrated with each other trying to fight over the same toys all the time. I did a whole video on indoor activities I will link below that give you guys all kinds of great ideas of things you can do to mix up your play in your small space. Tip number 5, if you don't have a large space but you have more space in your house, figure out a way to maybe change up the scenery. So what I do in the winter is sometimes we will go up to our living room, which is usually the only time they're ever up there is to watch a show before lunch. But I might bring in some of my daughter's toys if she's willing to share and bring them into the living room. Or we'll do like an exercise video up there. It's just sometimes nice to change the scenery, even if you're doing a lot of the same stuff, just to get somewhere else in the house so you're not staring at the same 4 walls all the time. And it can inspire them to play in different ways as well. So let's say, you know, another idea would be if you have a dining room and that's not normally where you are for craft time, maybe you'll go do a craft up there. If you have a really large bedroom, maybe you'll go in there and do an obstacle course or something. Just something to change up the scenery a little bit can be helpful. Tip number 6 has to deal with nap time. If you don't have a large space, but you need a large amount of kids to sleep in that small space, use bins or other types of things for partitions between the kids. I do not have cots because I don't have any space to store them. So what I do is just kids use a sleeping bag and a pillow on the floor, and that's how they sleep. But it can be really easy for the kids to, you know, roll onto each other or get up and run around or whatever. So what I do is we have these bins that we use for nap time. They look like this. It stores all of their nap materials, and I just use those in between the kids to separate them. I also separate these tables. I pull them apart so that I can fit a kid on each end and then in the middle, and that is also a way to kind of partition them off so that they're separated enough to not be enticed to talk to one another or be silly with one another, but it's not like having physical barriers all the time that would be separating them. Tip number 7 is to break up your groups. Have different kids play with other kids, and just, you know, encourage them to play with other kids once in a while, just so that they're, you know, playing in a different way. They're not getting in fights with the same kids over and over, and that way they're making better friendships with the other kids as well. So just assigning them different, you know, groups to play with or things to do can be really helpful as well. Tip number 8 is just to brave the elements. I know this video is about small spaces, but if you can, try to get outside. In the winter, it can be really, really hard, but we try to do it at least like 3 times a week if we're able. 5 times a week would be ideal, but it's not always possible. If you have a garage, you can try to get out there and play in the rain or in the snow, so that they're at least, you know, separated from the elements. Just open up the doors. You can even watch the rain or snow come down, which would be fun. Have some toy cars in there. They could still do chalk and stuff like that. Just try to get outside because it will help your sanity, even if it takes an hour, it seems like, to get all your winter gear on. Just try if you are able. It's so good to get that fresh air and to get out once in a while. Tip number 9 of having a small space is to have very strong routines. It can be really hard sometimes when the kids just want to do whatever they want to do, and it creates chaos, especially if you don't have a large space where they can go off and kind of do their own thing. But if you have really strong routines, it helps. So we always have circle time, craft time, story time. Those times allow us to, you know, redirect. We go sit in a new area. Like for circle time and craft time, we sit at the table, which they're not always sitting at the table, so that's kind of using the space in a new way. Story time, I sit in my chair and they sit around me. So just having those strong routines of what you do can help, you know, make the best use of your small space and use it in new ways throughout the day. And then lastly, tip number 10 is just to not be afraid to move things around, try new things. I'm constantly changing things up, seeing how my space can work better for my group. If you've seen my different daycare tours, you will know I haven't used the space the exact same way since I've started. I've used it in so many different ways. I didn't always have my tables up here. I've had them in the basement in the past, but I just find it works better up here right now. That may change as my group changes, as I, you know, take more trainings and think of things in different ways, as my kids get older and, you know, play in different ways. It can all make a difference. So don't be afraid to just switch things up, try new things, ask other people what works for them, and just try it out and see if it works for you. I wish you guys the best of luck. If you have other tips for surviving and thriving in a small daycare space, please leave them in the comments and keep the conversation going. I love you guys. I love our Glue Stick community. I'm so proud of how this channel has just really grown to help each other, and I am just so thankful for each and every one of you guys for watching and being part of our community. I will see you guys next time. Bye.